I finished reading In the Garden of Beasts by Erik Larson, and here's my book review. In the Garden of Beasts, Love, Terror, and an American Family in Hitler's Berlin by Erik Larson is a historical narrative that examines the rise of Nazi Germany through the eyes of the American ambassador to Germany, William E. Dodd, and his family during the early years of Adolf Hitler's rule, 1933 through 1937. Rather than focusing on major military events or later atrocities, Larson centers the story on how the gradual normalization of terror, showing how persecution unfolded in plain sight while much of the world failed to respond. William Dodd, a modest historian from North Carolina, arrives in Berlin initially hopeful that Germany might stabilize after the chaos of the Weimar years. His daughter Martha becomes deeply immersed in Berlin society, engaging romantically with influential men, including Nazis and Soviet agents. Through diplomatic cables, personal diaries, letters, and memoirs, Larson reconstructs how the Dodds witnessed Germany's descent into brutality, street violence, suppression of dissent, and increasingly explicit anti-Semitic policies long before the Holocaust formally begins. A central theme of the book is how evil does not arrive suddenly, but rather accumulates through indifference, rationalization, and political convenience. Turning a blind eye, American indifference to Jewish persecution. As a Jew, this is something that I really want to give a section to and emphasize. One of the most disturbing aspects of the book is how clearly early persecution of Jews was documented, and how consistently it was ignored. Larson shows that American diplomats, journalists, and government officials were well aware of anti-Semitic violence in Germany, boycotts of Jewish businesses, beatings, professional bans, and state-sponsored humiliation. These events were not hidden, they were reported, witnessed, and discussed. Yet the U.S. government largely chose restraint over moral clarity because of their isolationist view. The State Department discouraged Dodd from issuing strong condemnations, fearing damage to trade relations and diplomatic stability. Many American officials minimized Nazi violence as temporary excesses or eternal German matters. Anti-Semitism was often reframed as exaggeration or hysteria, particularly when reports came from Jewish sources. For Jewish readers, this indifference is especially painful. The book exposes how Jews were being targeted long before the world claims it didn't know. What it lacked was not information, but willingness. Larson makes clear that silence, neutrality, and bureaucratic caution played a direct role in enabling Nazi policies to intensify unchecked. Another aspect that I want to hit on as a Jewish reader is the Dodds family's changing views on Jews. At the beginning of their time in Germany, the Dodd family reflects many of the casual prejudices common in elite American society during the 1930s. They are largely indifferent to Jewish suffering, and at times even echo anti-Semitic stereotypes. William Dodd himself expresses concern that too many Jews worked in his office, and there are moments when the family entertains conspiracies, like assumptions about Jewish influence. One moment in the book that particularly pissed me off was when Martha went out with a group of friends in a town, and they saw a woman being paraded in the street, her hair clipped, and the woman was obviously distressed, being beaten and everything, with a sign hung around her neck that went along the lines of, "I have given myself to a Jew." Giving herself to a Jew referred to her husband, who happened to be Jewish. They witnessed this public humiliation of a woman, and Martha, in her lustful high of a German life in the early 1930s, excused this and was like, oh well, she shouldn't have been married to a Jewish man, it's illegal. Anyways, to continue on, instead of rambling on about that. However, as the years pass and the violence becomes undeniable, their perspective changes. By the end of their stay, William Dodd becomes one of the few American diplomats openly warning that Germany is on a path towards catastrophe. His growing sympathy towards Jews is not ideological, it is experimental. Larson presents this transformation as evidence that proximity to suffering can dismantle indifference, but also as a tragic reminder that recognition often comes too late. Martha, eventually, so she had a little love affair with a Soviet KGB spy named Boris, and eventually the Soviet, because he was also supposed to be an ambassador to Germany, so eventually the Soviets find out about this and try to recruit Martha herself to become a KGB agent, or just to help spy on Germany. So as time goes on and Martha begins to hate Germany more and more, she actually does end up helping the Soviets. And later on, after the war, she continued to show positive remarks and ideas about the Soviet Union, so that actually it got her in trouble, and she had to flee America and never got to return. She never continued her love affair with Boris, by the way. Mind you, if you read this book, it goes on unnecessarily too long about just how basically Martha was a whore. I'm gonna say it, sorry, not sorry. I can't tell you, I almost got whiplash reading this book, trying to figure out and put names to all the men she messed around with. Married, divorced 3 different times, at once she didn't even divorce one, I don't even know. There's so many people she messed around with, like I said, it gave me whiplash. Larson's acknowledgments and the emotional cost of witnessing history. In the acknowledgments, Larson reflects on the emotional toll of immersing himself in the Nazi era. He writes, "What I did not realize as I ventured into those dark days of Hitler's rule was how much the darkness would infiltrate my own soul. Living among Nazis day in and day out proved for me a uniquely trying experience." It does not mean literally living with Nazis, because he was not there during that time, but he means studying the history day in and day out, 24 hours. If you know me, I've said many, many times, I'm emotionally exhausted studying this history, especially as I get older and as I see the world. This admission is striking because it breaks the illusion of historical distance. Larson, a seasoned historian, acknowledges that sustained exposure to hatred, cruelty, and moral failure is psychologically corrosive. His words suggest that studying history is not a neutral act. It leaves marks on those who engage with it deeply. As a Jewish reader, especially a young one, I'm 18 years old, this reflection resonates profoundly. Learning about anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and the world's failures is not just educational, it is emotionally exhausting. Larson's acknowledgement validates the feeling that knowing too much can be painful, that emotional weight is not a weakness, but a natural response to confronting human cruelty, honestly. In my own personal book that I used to write reviews, I wrote down that I cried too much when reading about the Holocaust. And then I corrected myself. I said, no, actually, other people don't cry enough. They should be crying as much as I'm crying about this history. Because this is such a dark period, and it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, this is a history that obviously affected everybody around. The Third Reich went after anyone who were against them, and this book proves it. Even before World War II, in Hitler's early years of his rising, it tells you just how it is, how he went after so many people, and people who are considered of high status within the government. He killed them. I'm referring to the Night of Long Knives. If you don't know about that history, I read about it in this book, got some more information about that, and God, it is just awful. So no, I don't cry too much. Other people just don't cry enough. So in conclusion, In the Garden of Beasts is not simply a book about Nazi Germany. It is a study of how societies, governments, and individuals respond or fail to respond to emerging evil. Larson shows that the Holocaust was not inevitable in its early stages, but it became possible through denial, appeasement, and indifference. For Jewish readers, the book is particularly haunting. It forces confrontation with the reality that persecution was visibly long before genocide, and that much of the world chose comfort over conscience. At the same time, Larson's own emotional reckoning reminds readers that bearing witness to history carries a cost, and that struggling with that weight is part of remembering responsibly.